The only way Republicans can win is by suppressing the vote, particularly the minority vote. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Past the hour, it's Anything Goes Friday. Jay in Carson City, Nevada. Hey, Jay, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. My comment slash question is this. So, 2016, Donald Trump laid the seeds of voter fraud. He put together a commission to search out the voter fraud because he lost the popular vote and never found anything. That ended in 5 months. He did the same thing.
Hang on just a second. George W. Bush did the same thing in 2003 or 2002. Same thing, 2.5-year process.
But he didn't have Twitter.
Right.
He didn't have Twitter.
But Bush wasn't able to find any voter fraud either.
Right. So Trump did the same thing in 2020. And then his people attacked the Capitol. I mean, what does it take for the Republicans to hold this guy responsible? I mean, if Trump was to set off a nuclear bomb in the United States, would it depend on the reaction whether it hit a Republican state or a Democratic state? Because these guys are letting this guy off, and he's caused 5 people to die. And look at the Capitol and look at the White House. It's surrounded by barbed wire and fencing and armed guards.
I know. This is a real crisis, Jay, and the problem is the rot at the core of the Republican Party. I mean, this is essentially what my op-ed was today. Is that at the core of the Republican Party there is nothing more than fealty, a loyalty to billionaires and big corporations. That's it. Now, they've had to bring other people in to get enough votes to be able to run for political office and win. Nixon brought in the racists with his Southern strategy. Literally tens of millions of racists, white racists, flipped from being Democrats to being Republicans as a result of, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And in '68, Nixon just picked those folks up. Then Reagan brought in the homophobes, 8 years refusing to even say AIDS while people were dying. We had a national epidemic that he completely ignored. And then Bush... and then during the Clinton years, the Republican Party said, we've got to sell our brand. And they hooked up with Roger Ailes, who started his Fox News propaganda channel during the Clinton administration. And they started pitching, or maybe it was just a little before that. But in any case, but I don't think so. But they started pitching this idea that Republicans were like NASCAR and the Confederate flag and rural America and all that kind of stuff. And that was very intentional, because if you want to control the Senate, if you want to control the judiciary, one entire branch of government, you have to control the Senate. If you want to control the Senate, you have to control at least 25 states. The easiest states to pick up with the least amount of effort and the least amount of money are states that have populations of under 5 million people. So let's pick up South Dakota and North Dakota. Right up until the 1960s, those are both solidly Democratic states. Let's pick up. We could just go through the list, right? I mean, most of America was solidly Democratic up until the 60s, and up until the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. And so this has been their strategy, is just pick up the gun nuts, pick up the anti-abortion people. They helped flip the entire Protestant evangelical movement from being pro women's choice, pro-choice, to being anti-abortion in 2 years, in 1980-81 during the Reagan campaign, and that was engineered in part by George W. Bush.
In 244 years, a Confederate flag has never waved the United States Capitol. Donald Trump put a target on his own vice president's back. Donald Trump and his people, his followers, if you go against him, they attack you. Bill Barr, Mike Pence, Jeff Sessions, everybody who has spoke out about the truth about Trump and his actions, all of a sudden they turn their back on them and they start attacking him and want to kill him. The thing is, he's caused these deaths, his actions, and everybody who's been caught so far has said, well, we did it because our president told you to. Now, of course, they're saying this so they can get a lighter sentence, they're hoping. And they're hoping for a pardon from Trump. I mean, Trump even pardoned...
But they're also saying it because it's true, Jay.
Well, it is. It is true. It is 100%. Yes, exactly. We listened to his words. But Trump is not the law and order president. He wanted to be a dictator of America. He wanted his people to storm the United States Capitol to kill everybody so he can be put in place. What is going on?
Well, what's going on is a couple of big lies are converging. And again, these big lies are necessitated because the Republican Party has nothing to offer average Americans. And so they have to come up with some way to get people to the polls. So the NRA, back in the 80s, when the NRA, well, actually, I think it was the late 70s. It's in my first book, my first hidden history book. It's got the whole history of it, the hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment. The NRA went from being a sports organization to being a lobbying front group for the weapons manufacturing industry. The sales pitch that they used, and they literally changed this in the late 70s as a result of an op-ed that was published in the Rifleman, which was then the NRA's magazine, an op-ed written by a high school student who was asserting that the reason the Second Amendment was in the Constitution was because these people who had just fought a revolutionary war against Britain and established their own country wanted to make sure that the people in that country could overthrow the government that they had just created if it ever became tyrannical. Now, and this is the sales pitch that you will hear from all these right-wing militias. Oh, yeah, the Second Amendment's there so that we can overthrow the government if it ever becomes tyrannical. That was never even discussed by any of the founders, literally never even discussed. It was never discussed in the constitutional conventions. It was never discussed in the ratifying conventions. It was never discussed in the debates on the Second Amendment. Never. That was never even part of American history prior to the 1970s, when this high school kid published this piece in the National Rifle Association's magazine. The NRA picked up that lie, that the Second Amendment is there so that armed Americans can keep their government honest. They picked up that lie and promoted it like crazy. And that has led to this widespread so-called militia movement with multiple faces. You know, the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, all these groups.
Exactly.
They believe this stuff. They believe this lie that this high school kid published in the NRA magazine, and as I recall, it was 1978. And as a result, we've got that big lie, the guns, we need lots of guns in order to take on our government. You got that big lie. Plus, the Republican Party was never able to get a serious majority of people who were actually voting for them because of their policies, because their policies were always for rich people and big corporations. And so how did they win elections? Suppressing the vote. How did George W. Bush become president, for example? His brother Jeb ordered Katherine Harris to throw 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls in Florida just months before the election. She did it using a felon list that George W. Bush, the governor of Texas, had given her. And bingo, you're within 500 votes of stealing the White House. Voter suppression has worked really, really well for the Republicans for years, for decades. And the only reason it works is because Americans believe that there's this huge unwashed horde of mostly black and Hispanic people out there who are just itching to illegally vote. In the case of black people who are citizens, they want to vote multiple times. This was a charge that Donald Trump made when he lost the New Hampshire primary. He said, well, that's because all these black people from Boston were taking buses up to New Hampshire and voting in the New Hampshire primary. It was a lie then, it's a lie now.
In Wisconsin, too, he tried to do that. And
I know, and they keep promoting this lie. And then he said in California, the reason Hillary Clinton won, 3 million more votes than him was because there are all these Hispanics in California who are not U.S. citizens, and they vote. That's a lie. It's an absolute lie. George W. Bush spent 2.5 years, $74 million, and all 100 federal prosecutors looking into this, and was able to find a total of 31 cases of voter fraud out of 1 billion votes over a decade. Loyola University did a similar study and found 81 cases nationwide over a 20-year period. Donald Trump had his commission with Chris Kobach in charge of it. They were convinced they were going to find voter fraud. They spent millions on this.
It lasted 5 months.
They found one guy who was a Swiss citizen who voted for Donald Trump. That was it, right?
Donald Trump said
they've got to maintain these two big lies. And that's why you've got this.
There was dead people voting, but the two people that was caught that was dead, that used their dead mothers, they were Republicans and voted for Trump. But what's really
that was in Georgia.
Is what's really bad is having McCarthy going to Florida to kiss the ring of the mob boss, that just fed more substance and lies and conviction of how Trump is feeling for these people for QAnon, for the Proud Boys. They just gave them more food to fuel.
Yeah, and then on top of that, he takes Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says that the Parkland shooting and the Sandy Hook shooting were both false flag operations, and follows David Hogg around yelling at him. He puts her, McCarthy puts her in charge of the Education Committee.